I hope that you heard last week's sermon. If you did not, I hope that you'll pick up a copy of it through the office if you want to call. It is a 4-part series, so this is the second part of the series. I'm going to start with an illustration. For some of you who have been in classes that I have taught in preparation for marriage, when I used to be the one teaching those classes, I often use the example of a love bank. And a love bank, and we do have a newlywed couple here today, the Heises, and congratulations to you guys. They've been married all of 8 days, and so we want to, Matt, listen very carefully to all these things I'm going to say to you today, okay? But a love bank is when you do something good for your wife, then it's like you make a deposit. And if you do something bad, you're making a withdrawal. And the object is you want to keep your bank full all the time. Well, guys, listen up. Women, just don't listen at all, okay? But listen up, guys. You know what I did this week? I took my wife to see The Time Traveler's Wife. Oh, yes. And when we walked out in the theater, every woman coming out was just crying like crazy. It is one of those sobby, lovey-dovey, cushy love stories. So, guys, that's the way to put money in the bank. And I tell you, my bank is just bubbling over right now. So, once you take them to that movie, they're just like putty in your hand. So, Okay, now, women, you can start listening again. All right, so I asked Darlene a few weeks ago, I said, honey, how would you like to help me to preach a sermon from the Song of Solomon? And of course, you know my wife. She loves to sing, but she doesn't want to do any of the talking or anything. And so she said, I was thinking, no way. But she said, I'd love to. And so I had offered it. Not really. It's like asking someone to come to dinner when you really don't want them to come to dinner. So I found myself in a real bind there. And she was going to stand up here and preach with me, point by point of the sermon. And I was afraid of what she might have to say about me so I'm going to speak for my wife this morning. But in her absence, and I'm sure that what I have to say will be the same thing that she would have said about me were she here right now. So the real reason I asked Darlene if she wanted to help is because the Song of Solomon is actually a duet with the background of a choral group. And so it is the husband and wife, the tenor and the soprano, who are singing the parts. And I don't know if, David, has anybody ever put this to music? Okay. Would be a beautiful song if you heard it sung the way I think God intended for it to be sung. I remember the first time I met my wife. It was not, hey, I'm going to think about this. I might be interested in dating her. It was 110%. I elbowed my friend and said, introduce us. I knew that she was it. Now, anybody can fall in love. But how do you stay in love? That's the real issue. No hands raised, but so many married couples will honestly say, we're not in love. So the point of the sermon today is about how to stay in love. And I'm going to give 3 points to the men and 3 points to the women. My advice, God's advice on how to keep love in your marriage. Men, you're first. Advice number 1 to men. Compliment your wife. Sometimes that's hard. That was my wife. Now, verse 9 doesn't sound much like a compliment, but it is. Look at chapter 1, verse 9. I liken you, my darling, to a mare, to a horse harnessed to one of the chariots of Pharaoh. Now, that was a compliment back in those days. Because you remember the Israelites, if of all people, they knew how powerful the Egyptians were. And the strength of the Egyptian army was the horse. And so Solomon turns to his wife and he says, "You are my strength. You are the strong one in our relationship. You have the fortitude, the guts." You know, I get so tired of watching these television programs where the American male is presented as a bumbling idiot, because we're not. We are intelligent, smart, decent people. But guys, I get just as tired of us talking about wives as if they are blonde bimbos, because they're not. They too are intelligent, creative, strong individuals made in the image of God. Now, husbands, you need to say at least one good thing about your wife to your wife every day. Don't brag to others about your wife. Tell her face to face. Now, my suggestion is that, Matt, I know you're new at this. Do not go out right after church and turn to Michelle and say, "Honey, you're like a horse." That would not be a good compliment. Now, it doesn't have the same message it did 3,000 years ago. But say something nice to Michelle every single day of your marriage. Now, a compliment is not a lie. Don't lie. A compliment is a truth that needs to be heard and needs to be spoken. Guys, write down one compliment that you can give your wife today. Now, we're going to wait for a second because I want you to write down something. And, you know, for those of you who are single or not married, maybe you know a couple and you might want to take this example back to the office or back to home and say, you know, you might want to say something nice to your wife today. Here's a suggestion. Okay, you've got that? If you continue to work on it, wives, let's go to your first point. Overlook your husband's weak points. I just happened to be at the kitchen table. What can I say? We all have weak points, don't we? And, Brother Jim could tell us that probably women crave reassurance and compliments more than men do. But you know what men fear? Men fear being put down in public, especially by their wife, the person who knows them best. Verse 13, my lover is to me a sachet of myrrh resting between my breast. Now, you heard the story last week. Solomon probably hadn't had a bath for 6 months. But his wife did not say, "Ew, gosh, you stink." She said, "Honey, you smell wonderful." He had dirty nails, tangled hair, but she said, "You smell absolutely awesome." Now, wives, if you, in public, point out one of your husband's weak points, take a point out of your bank. And if people laugh about that weak point and you're pointing it out, take 2 points out. Even your husband might laugh. But while he laughs, he's also deducting from your bank. Your husband needs to be your rock. He needs to feel like that he is your protector, your shelter, that you perceive him to be strong. And if I go out and mow the grass and I come in and the first thing my wife says to me is, "Ew, you got BO." You know what I'd do the next week? I'd pull the lawnmower out, set it on the driveway, and say, "If you want the grass mowed, you mow it." And you can ask Darlene if I would do that, and I would.